I buried my soul long before I ever stood at her grave. The rain that night didn't fall hard, it whispered, like it knew something I didn't. I remember the way it blurred the neon lights outside the diner window, turning the city into something softer than it really was. I hadn't stepped into a place like that in over 20 years. Too small. Too quiet. Too human. Men like me didn't belong in places where people still smiled without asking for something in return. I sat in the far booth, back to the wall out of habit, eyes tracking every reflection in the glass. Old instincts don't fade. They just settle deeper into your bones. 65 years old, and I still couldn't sit with my back exposed. That should tell you everything about the life I built. Or destroyed. Depends how you look at it. The waitress didn't notice me at first. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. That was new. People usually knew. Not who I was exactly, but what I was. Power leaves a shadow. Fear recognizes it. But she walked up like I was just another tired man passing through town. "Coffee?" she asked. No hesitation. No nervous smile. Just, normal. I nodded. Didn't trust my voice yet. Her name tag read Emily. Simple. Like her voice. Like the way she moved, quick, efficient, but not rushed. She poured the coffee, and for a second, I caught her eyes. Green. Not the kind you forget. Not the kind I had any business noticing. I looked away first. That was new too. I used to make people look away. Always. I wrapped my hands around the mug. It was hot. Real. Grounded me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I used to drink whiskey at this hour. Expensive. Smooth. Useless. Coffee felt honest. I didn't like that. Or maybe I did. I just didn't know how to admit it. The place smelled like bacon and burnt toast. Someone laughed at the counter. A couple argued softly in the corner like it actually mattered who was right. Normal life. The kind I had traded for something colder a long time ago. I told myself it was worth it. You don't survive my world without believing that. Emily came back a few minutes later, wiping her hands on a towel. You look like you haven't slept in a week. She said. Just like that. No fear. No filter. I stared at her. People didn't talk to me that way. They calculated every word. Measured every breath. She just said it. I sleep, I replied. It wasn't a lie. Just not the truth anyone would understand. She tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was something that didn't quite add up. That's not what I meant. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have a response ready. No command. No threat. No carefully chosen words to control the moment. Just silence. Heavy. Unfamiliar. She didn't wait for me to answer. Just gave a small shrug and walked off to another table like the conversation was over. Like I wasn't someone who needed to be figured out. I should have left right then. Paid the bill. Disappeared back into the city that made sense to me. But I didn't. I stayed. Watching her move between tables. Listening to the quiet hum of a world I didn't belong to anymore. Or maybe, never did. That was the night everything shifted. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just a crack. Small. Invisible to anyone else. But I felt it. Right here. In a place I thought was already dead. I should have left after that first cup. That would have been the smart move. Clean. Simple. The way I handled everything else in my life. But instead, I finished the coffee. Then I ordered another. Emily noticed. Of course she did. You planning on staying all night? She asked when she refilled my mug, one eyebrow slightly raised like she already knew the answer. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Just past midnight. The city never really slept, but places like this, they slowed down. Became something quieter. More honest. Maybe, I said. She gave a soft huff, not quite a laugh. Then you are going to need something stronger than coffee. She slid a menu toward me, but I did not look at it. I was watching her instead. The way she moved without hesitation. The way she spoke like she had nothing to prove. It unsettled me more than any threat ever had. What do you recommend? I asked. It felt like a strange question coming out of my mouth. I was not used to asking. I was used to deciding. Depends, she said, leaning. One hand lightly against the table, casual, unguarded. Are you the kind of guy who actually tastes his food, or the kind who just eats because he has to? I almost smiled. Almost. I do not remember, I answered truthfully. Something in her expression shifted. Not pity. Something sharper. Like she understood more than I had said. Then we will fix that, she replied. She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving me with that sentence sitting heavier than it should have. We will fix that. As if something in me was broken. As if she had already decided it could be repaired. No one had spoken to me like that in decades. Not since before everything changed. The plate she brought back was simple. Eggs. Toast. Bacon. Nothing expensive. Nothing impressive. But when she set it down, she did not rush away like the others. She stayed for a second, watching. Waiting. Go on, she said. Try it. I hesitated. Not because of the food. Because of the moment. It felt unfamiliar. Like stepping into a memory that did not belong to me anymore. Still, I picked up the fork. Took a bite. It should not have meant anything. Just food. Just another transaction in a long night. But it did. The taste hit differently. Not because it was extraordinary. Because it was real. Warm. Immediate. Not dulled by alcohol or distraction or the constant noise of power and control. I swallowed slowly. Emily was still watching me. Well? She asked. I exhaled through my nose, something close to a laugh slipping out before I could stop it. It tastes like something, I said. She smiled then. Not wide. Not dramatic. Just enough to change the entire room. That is usually how it works, she replied. I looked down at the plate again. At the steam rising faintly into the dim light. At my own hands, steady for once without needing control. I had built an empire on knowing exactly who I was. Exactly what I was capable of. But sitting there, in that small booth, with a stranger who refused to see me the way the world did. I felt something shift again. Slight. Quiet. But undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, I did not push it away. I let it stay. I do not remember deciding to come back the next night. That is the strange part. Men like me make decisions. We calculate. We control outcomes before they happen. But the next evening, just after 11, I found myself standing outside that same diner, rain gone, the air colder, sharper, like the city had reset overnight. I told myself it was nothing. Just curiosity. Just a habit forming where there had been none. I stepped inside. The bell above the door rang soft, almost polite. Emily looked up immediately. Not surprised. Not impressed. Just aware. You came back, she said, like she had expected it without needing to think about it. I shrugged off my coat slowly. Seems like it. She nodded once, like that answered something for her, then gestured toward the same booth. Your seat is still there. Your seat. The words settled deeper than they should have. I sat down, back to the wall again, but it felt different this time. Less like defense. More like familiarity. She brought the coffee without asking. Set it down in front of me with the same steady hand. You sleep any better? She asked. I looked at the cup, then back at her. I did not think about it, I said. That was the truth. For the first time in years, I had not spent the night replaying decisions, tracking threats, measuring outcomes. I had simply slept. She studied me for a second longer than usual. That is something, she said quietly. Then she turned to handle another table, leaving me with that same unsettling feeling I had the night before. Like she saw the parts of me I kept buried and did not flinch. I watched her move again. Not because I meant to. Because I could not seem to stop. A man at the counter dropped his wallet. She noticed before he did. Picked it up. Called him back with a simple, "Sir, you forgot this." No hesitation. No expectation of anything in return. He thanked her. She smiled. That was it. No transaction. No leverage. Just decency. I looked away. Something about that moment pressed against an old memory. Something I had locked away a long time ago. Before the suits. Before the silence. Before I became someone people avoided eye contact with. I took a sip of the coffee. It tasted the same. But I did not. Emily came back a few minutes later, sliding into the opposite side of the booth without asking. That caught me off guard. No one sat across from me unless invited. And I had not invited her. You are staring, she said, resting her arms lightly on the table. No accusation. Just fact. I met her eyes. I am observing, I corrected. She smiled slightly. That sounds like a man who does not know how to relax. I almost responded with something sharp. Something that would put distance back between us. But the words did not come. Instead, I asked, do you always talk to strangers like this? She leaned back just a little, considering. Only the ones who look like they forgot how to be human. The air shifted. Quiet. Heavy. But not threatening. Just, honest. I should have ended it there. Stood up. Walked out. Returned to the version of myself that did not allow conversations like that to exist. But I stayed. Again. And this time, I did not pretend it was an accident. Because somewhere between the first cup of coffee and that sentence, I realized something I had not felt in decades. I did not feel invisible anymore. I had spent decades building walls that no one could cross. Not business rivals. Not allies. Not even the ghosts of my own past. And yet, somehow, this girl with a coffee pot and a quiet voice kept stepping through them like they were not even there. Emily did not ask permission to understand me. She just did. That was the part one could not explain. Or control. She stood up from the booth after a moment, brushing her hands lightly against her apron. You should try the pie tonight, she said, like the conversation we had just shared was not something that would have shaken most people. It is fresh. I made it myself. I raised an eyebrow slightly. You cook too? She gave a small shrug. I do what needs to be done. There was something in that sentence. Something familiar. I had said the same thing once. A lifetime ago. Before it stopped meaning anything. She disappeared again, and I sat there, staring at the empty space she left behind. I realized then that I was not watching the room anymore. Not tracking exits. Not measuring threats. My attention had narrowed. Focused. On. Her. That was dangerous. Not for me. For her. I leaned back in the booth, fingers tapping once against the ceramic mug before going still again. Old habits tried to surface. Calculations. Distance. Control. But they felt slower tonight. Like something inside me was resisting them. Emily returned with a slice of pie on a small white plate. Apple. Still warm. I could see the steam rise in the low light. She set it down in front of me and slid a fork across the table. On the house, she said. I frowned slightly. I do not take charity. Her expression did not change. It is not charity. It is called being nice. You should try it sometime. I looked at her for a long second. Measuring. Not her. The moment. Then I picked up the fork. Another unfamiliar choice. Another small surrender. The first bite was simple. Sweet. Real. I did not rush it. Did not treat it like something to get through. I let it sit. Let it exist. Emily watched again, quieter this time. Not waiting for approval. Just, present. Why do you do that? I asked after a moment. She tilted her head. Do what? Treat strangers like they matter. The question came out rougher than I intended. More honest than I expected. She leaned one hip lightly against the table, thinking. Because sometimes they do, she said. No hesitation. No performance. Just truth. I looked down at the plate again. At the small, ordinary thing in front of me that somehow carried more weight than any deal I had signed in the past 10 years. And if they do not? I asked quietly. She gave a soft breath, almost a laugh but not quite. Then at least I know I did. Silence settled between us again. But it was different now. Not empty. Not tense. Something else. Something I did not have a name for anymore. I finished the pie slowly. Set the fork down with more care than necessary. When I looked up, she was still there. Still watching me like I was not someone to fear. Not someone to avoid. Just, someone. That was the moment it hit me. Not all at once. Not like a revelation. More like a quiet realization that had been building since the night before. I had spent years believing I was beyond change. Beyond anything that resembled a second chance. But sitting there, across from someone who saw me without knowing me, I felt something I had buried a long time ago begin to surface. Not power. Not control. Something softer. More dangerous. Hope. And I did not know what to do with it. I did not plan to return a third night. That would have meant admitting something I was not ready to name. But habit is a quiet thing. It builds without asking. And by 11:45, I was already walking through the same door, the same bell announcing me like it had been waiting. Emily did not look surprised this time. She just glanced up from the counter, caught my eyes, and gave a small nod like I had passed some unspoken test. You are becoming predictable, she said as I took my seat. I removed my coat slower than usual. I have never been accused of that. She poured the coffee, steady as always. There is a first time for everything. I watched her move away, then back again, like the space between us had shortened without either of us acknowledging it. Something had shifted. Not just in me. In the way she spoke. In the way she stayed a second longer than necessary. The diner was quieter tonight. A few late customers. A man reading a newspaper he was not really reading. A woman stirring her tea without drinking it. Ordinary lives unfolding in small, forgettable ways. But I noticed them now. That was new. I noticed everything now. Emily slid into the booth across from me again, uninvited, like it had become part of the routine. "So," she said, resting her chin lightly against her hand, "what do you actually do?" The question landed softer than it should have. Simple. Direct. Dangerous. I held her gaze. There were a dozen answers I could have given. None of them true. None of them safe. "I work," I said finally. She did not smile this time. "Everyone works." There was no challenge in her voice. Just expectation. I exhaled slowly, feeling something tighten in my chest. "I built things," I added. That part, at least, was not a lie. Her eyes flickered, interested. "Like what?" I looked past her, out the window, where the city light stretched into something endless. Structures. Systems. Things that last. She followed my gaze for a moment, then looked back at me. "Do they make people's lives better?" The question caught me off guard. Not because I had not heard it before. Because I had stopped asking it a long time ago. "They make things efficient," I said carefully. She studied me again, that same quiet way that made it impossible to hide behind words. "That is not the same thing," she said. I did not respond. Because she was right. And I did not have a version of the truth that could change that. A man near the door struggled with a bag of groceries, one handle tearing under the weight. Apples rolled across the floor, bouncing softly against the tiles. Without hesitation, Emily stood, crossed the room, and crouched to help him gather them. No hesitation. No thought. Just action. The man thanked her, embarrassed, but she waved it off like it was nothing. Like kindness was not something you measured or counted. I watched the entire thing in silence. Something inside me tightened again. Not discomfort. Recognition. A memory of a version of myself that would have done the same thing without thinking. Before the suits. Before the distance. Before I decided that caring was a liability. Emily returned to the booth, brushing her hands lightly together. "Where were we?" she asked. I looked at her. Really looked this time. At the way she carried herself without fear. At the way she moved through the world like it was still worth believing in. "You are asking questions I do not have answers to," I said. She leaned back slightly, studying me again. "Everyone has answers," she replied softly. "Some people just do not like what they are." The word settled deeper than anything she had said before. Not sharp. Not accusatory. Just honest. I looked down at the coffee, now half gone, the surface still and dark. For years, I had known exactly who I was. Or at least, I thought I did. But sitting there, across from someone who refused to accept the surface, I felt something shift again. Stronger this time. Not just a crack. A fracture. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if the man I had become was the only version of me left. The fourth night, I did not check the time before I walked in. I did not need to. My body already knew where it was going. That was the part that unsettled me the most. Not the place. Not the girl. The fact that I was no longer deciding. The bell rang again as I pushed the door open, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to anticipation. I did not like that word. It implied hope. And hope had no place in the world I built. Emily was behind the counter this time, leaning over a notepad, scribbling something quickly before tearing the page off and tucking it into her apron. She looked up when I entered, and there it was again. That small shift in her expression. Not surprise. Not curiosity. Recognition. "You are earlier tonight," she said, glancing at the clock. I followed her gaze. 11:15. She was right. I was. Seems I am getting worse, I replied. She smiled faintly. Or better. Depends how you look at it. I sat down, same booth, same angle, but it no longer felt like a position of defense. It felt like a place. Mine. That realization sat heavy in my chest. Emily brought the coffee without asking again, but this time she placed something beside it. A folded napkin. I looked at it, then at her. What is this? She shrugged lightly. Something I thought you might need. I unfolded it slowly. Inside was a small, handwritten list. 3 items. Sleep before midnight. Eat something real. Talk to someone like they matter. I stared at the words longer than I should have. Simple. Direct. Impossible. You think it is that easy? I asked quietly. She did not sit this time. She stayed standing, arms loosely crossed. No, she said. I think it is that simple. There was a difference. I could hear it. I just did not know how to accept it. I folded the napkin again, more carefully than necessary, and set it beside my cup. Something about the gesture felt important. Like I was holding on to something I did not fully understand yet. A man near the window coughed lightly, drawing Emily away for a moment. I watched her move, the same steady rhythm, the same quiet awareness of everyone around her. She noticed things before they became problems. Handed the man a glass of water before he asked. Adjusted a chair for a woman without interrupting her conversation. Small things. Invisible to most people. But not to me. Not anymore. I leaned back slightly, letting out a slow breath. My world had always been built on large moves. Big decisions. Power that shifted entire systems. But here, everything that mattered was small. A glance. A word. A gesture. And somehow, those small things carried more weight than anything I had controlled in years. Emily returned, sliding into the booth again, but this time she did not speak right away. She looked at the napkin, then at me. You kept it, she said. I nodded once. I do not usually take advice. She tilted her head slightly. But you did. Silence settled again. Not uncomfortable. Just, present. Why? I asked after a moment. The question surprised even me. She did not rush to answer. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. Because you look like someone who forgot he has a choice, she said softly. The words landed deeper than anything before them. Not sharp. Not forceful. Just undeniable. I looked away, out the window, where the city stretched endlessly into the dark. For years, I had believed everything I did was necessary. That there was no other way. No other version of the man I had become. But sitting there, across from someone who saw past all of it, I felt something shift again. Not a crack. Not a fracture. Something larger. Something that made it harder to breathe for a second. The realization that maybe, just maybe, I had chosen this life. And if that was true, then I could choose something else. I looked back at her, really looked this time. And for the first time in a long time, the future did not feel like something already decided. The 5th night, I almost did not go. That was how I knew it mattered. Standing in my apartment, looking out over a city that had once felt like it belonged to me, I hesitated. Not because I was busy. Not because something demanded my attention. Because something inside me was asking a question I had avoided for years. Who are you when no one is watching? I did not like the answer. So I put on my coat and left anyway. The drive felt longer than usual. Traffic lights I normally ignored seemed to hold me in place. The world moved slower when you started noticing it. When you stopped forcing it to move around you. By the time I reached the diner, my hands were steady, but something deeper was not. The bell rang as I stepped inside, softer this time, or maybe I just heard it differently. Emily was not at the counter. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was the silence. Not empty. Just different. The man with the newspaper was gone. The woman with the tea was gone. New faces. New patterns. But something felt off. I took my seat anyway. Waited. For the first time since I had started coming here, I felt the absence before I felt her presence. It unsettled me more than I expected. A different waitress approached, older, slower, eyes tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "What can I get you?" she asked. Her voice was polite. Distant. I hesitated. "Where is Emily?" The question came out too quickly. Too direct. The woman glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me. "Day off," she said. Simple. Final. I nodded once. Of course. People had lives outside of the moments I stepped into. That should not have felt like something worth noticing. But it did. I ordered coffee anyway. It did not taste the same. It was the same brand. The same cup. The same heat. But it lacked something I could not name. Or maybe I could. I just did not want to admit it. I sat there longer than I needed to. Watching a room that suddenly felt unfamiliar again. Like the connection I thought I had found had been temporary. Accidental. A brief illusion of something more. I told myself that was how it should be. That was how it always had been. Nothing lasted. Not in my world. Not for me. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the folded napkin. The list. Still there. I had not thrown it away. That alone should have told me something had already changed. Sleep before midnight. Eat something real. Talk to someone like they matter. I looked at the words again, tracing them with my thumb. Simple. Impossible. And yet. I had already started. Without realizing it. I set the napkin back down on the table, staring at it like it held answers I was not ready to face. That was when the door opened again. The bell rang. I did not look up right away. I did not want to expect anything. But I felt it. The shift in the room. Subtle. Quiet. Familiar. "You look like someone who forgot how to wait," her voice said from behind me. I turned slowly. Emily stood there, coat still on, hair slightly out of place like she had rushed. Not supposed to be here. But here anyway. I felt something settle in my chest that I did not recognize at first. Not relief. Not control. Something steadier. Something real. "I thought you had the night off," I said. She shrugged lightly, stepping closer. I did. She slid into the booth across from me like she had never left. "Then why are you here?" I asked. She looked at me for a long second. Not analyzing. Not guessing. Just seeing. "Because I realized something," she said softly. I waited. Something in me completely still for the first time in years. She leaned forward slightly, resting her arms on the table. "Some people do not come back unless it matters." Silence. Heavy. Honest. I held her gaze. And in that moment, I understood something I had spent a lifetime avoiding. This was not an accident anymore. Not curiosity. Not habit. It mattered. And that meant everything was about to change. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The diner faded into the background again, the low hum of conversations, the soft clatter of dishes, all of it distant compared to the weight of what sat between us. Emily did not rush to fill the silence. She never did. That was part of what made her different. She let things exist. Let them breathe. I studied her, really studied her this time, as if seeing her clearly for the first time instead of through the distance I usually kept. "You should not have come back," I said finally. The words felt heavier than I expected. Not a warning. Not exactly. More like a truth I did not want to accept. She did not flinch. "Why?" she asked. Simple. Direct. Always direct. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in the booth, my fingers brushing against the edge of the table before going still. "Because people like me, we do not bring good things with us," I said. That was the closest I had come to honesty. Not the full truth. But enough. She watched me for a long second, her expression unreadable in a way that was new. Not closed off. Just thinking. "You keep saying that," she replied quietly. "But you have not shown me anything that proves it." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was impossible. "That is because you are only seeing this version of me," I said. "The one that sits here and drinks coffee and pretends he knows what it tastes like." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus. "And the other version?" she asked. The question hung there. Waiting. I looked down at the table, at the faint scratches in the wood, marks left by people who had passed through without thinking twice. "He does not belong here," I said quietly. That was the truth. The only way I knew how to say it without saying everything. Emily leaned forward slightly, her voice softer now, but stronger in a way that made it impossible to ignore. "Maybe that is the problem," she said. I looked up at her. "What do you mean?" She held my gaze, steady, unshaken. "Maybe you have been living in a place you do not belong for a very long time." The words landed deeper than anything she had said before. Not because they were sharp. Because they were precise. Too precise. I felt something tighten in my chest again, that same unfamiliar pressure that had been building night after night. "You do not know anything about my life," I said, but there was no edge in my voice. No defense. Just resistance. She nodded once. "You are right," she said. "I do not." Then she paused, just long enough to let the next words settle before she spoke them. "But I know what it looks like when someone is tired of being who they became." Silence. Heavy. Real. I could not look away this time. Could not retreat behind distance or control. Because she was not wrong. That was the part one could not escape. I had been tired for a long time. Not physically. Not in the way people understood. Something deeper. Something that no amount of power or control had ever been able to fix. I looked down at my hands again, at the faint tremor I had spent years pretending was not there. "And what if that is all there is?" I asked quietly. "What if this is just who I am now?" Emily did not answer right away. She reached into her apron, pulled out a pen, and turned the napkin toward her. "The same one. The list." She added one more line at the bottom. Then she slid it back toward me. I looked down at it. "Change is a choice." I stared at the words longer than I should have. They did not feel like advice. They felt like a challenge. I looked back up at her. "You make it sound easy," I said. She shook her head slightly. "No," she replied. "I make it sound possible." And for the first time in a long time, I did not argue with that. I just sat there, staring at a simple piece of paper, realizing that everything I had believed about myself might not be as permanent as I had convinced myself it was. And that possibility was more terrifying than anything I had ever faced. I did not leave right away that night. That would have been the easier choice. Take the napkin. Take the words. Walk back into the version of my life where nothing changed and everything made sense. But I stayed. Sitting there, staring at 4 simple lines written in a handwriting that did not belong to my world. Sleep before midnight. Eat something real. Talk to someone like they matter. Change is a choice. I had built an empire on decisions that never questioned themselves. Every move calculated. Every outcome predicted. There was no space for something like choice. Not the kind she was talking about. Not the kind that required you to look at yourself without excuses. Emily did not push me. She never did. She stood up after a while, returning to her work, leaving me alone with something far more dangerous than any enemy I had ever faced. A question. I looked around the diner again, really looked this time. The man at the counter was laughing now, his shoulders lighter than when he walked in. The older waitress moved slower, but she moved with purpose, like she had done this 1,000 times and still found a reason to keep going. Emily passed by a table, placing a hand briefly on someone's shoulder as she refilled their cup. Small things. Invisible things. But they mattered. I could see that now. I reached for the coffee, then stopped. It was already cold. Hours ago, I would have ignored that. Drank it anyway. Tonight, I pushed it aside. A small decision. Meaningless to anyone else. But I felt it. I stood up slowly, taking the napkin with me, folding it carefully before slipping it into my coat pocket. Emily noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. She walked over, stopping just close enough that I could see the question in her eyes without her needing to ask it. "You are leaving?" she said. I nodded once. Yes. She waited. Not for an explanation. For something else. Something I had not given anyone in a very long time. "I will come back," I added. The words felt unfamiliar. Not a promise. Not a command. Just intention. She studied me for a second longer, then gave a small nod. "Good," she said softly. No smile this time. Just something steadier. Something that felt like belief. I turned toward the door, the bell ringing again as I stepped out into the night. The air was colder than before. Sharper. But it did not feel the same. Nothing did. I stood there for a moment, looking out at the city that had once felt like the only place I belonged. The buildings were still the same. The lights. The endless noise. But something in me had shifted. Not completely. Not all at once. But enough. Enough to feel the difference between who I had been and who I might still become. I reached into my pocket, feeling the folded napkin again. Not as a reminder. As a choice. For the first time in decades, I did not feel like a man trapped inside a life he could not escape. I felt like someone standing at the edge of something unknown. And instead of turning away, I took a step forward. Because that was the night I finally understood something I had spent my entire life avoiding. Power can control everything around you. But it cannot fix what is broken inside. Only a choice can do that. And for the first time, I was ready to make one.